The market of Vanar Prime was alive with noise. Shouts, laughter, and the metallic echo of cages slamming shut filled the long corridors of rusted steel. Merchants displayed their strange goods, creatures from across the galaxy, weapons made of plasma, and rare minerals that glowed in the dark. But in one corner of the market, far away from the shining stalls, was a darker trade. Here, living beings were treated as nothing more than objects. They were locked inside cages, labeled with cruel words and priced like tools or broken machines. In one of those cages sat a young alien girl. Her skin shimmered faintly under the dim light, pale with streaks of silver like the reflection of moonlight on water. Her eyes were large, glowing faintly blue, but they were dull with despair. She did not move much, curled in the corner of her cage. The sign outside called her a pleasure toy, just another body for those who could pay. To the traders, she had no name, no story, no future. She was just another product waiting to be sold. A crowd gathered as a merchant shouted about her. Exotic, obedient, young, and perfect for entertainment, he barked, slamming the cage with a rod. The girl flinched but did not resist. Her heart had already given up long ago. She knew no one would see her as anything more than property, and even if someone bought her, it would only mean a new kind of prison. But then, through the smoke and noise of the market, a human walked in. He was tall, wearing a worn coat with the insignia of an old ship crew. His hair was dark, his face calm but sharp, his eyes scanning the cages one by one. Unlike the other buyers, he did not laugh, did not shout, did not throw coins at the merchants. He simply walked slowly, observing, silent. When his eyes landed on the alien girl, he stopped. The crowd pushed past him, not caring, but he did not move. For a long moment, he just stared at her. She looked back, uncertain, her glowing eyes narrowing as if preparing for another cruel owner. The merchant grinned and shouted, "You have good taste, human. She is one of my best, fragile but beautiful, perfect for your kind of fun." But the human did not smile. Instead, he spoke softly, "How much?" The merchant licked his lips. For her, expensive, but worth it. She is trained to be silent, never resists, never fights back. The human's jaw tightened, his voice steady. "How much?" Coins exchanged, papers signed, and the cage door creaked open. The girl lowered her head, expecting rough hands, expecting orders, expecting pain. But instead, the human simply held out his hand, not to grab but to guide. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Come, you are free from this place." The alien girl hesitated, confusion flashing in her eyes. Free? That word had no meaning here. No one bought slaves to free them. She stepped out slowly, her legs weak from being locked for so long. The human did not drag her, did not touch her, only walked beside her as they left the market. The crowd laughed, some even mocked. "Look at the fool, wasting credits on a broken toy. Humans are strange indeed." But the human did not respond. He walked on, leading her through the narrow alleys until the sound of the market faded. They stopped near a quiet docking bay where an old freighter ship waited. The air smelled of oil and metal. The human turned to her, his voice steady. "You are safe now." She blinked at him, her voice weak and trembling. "Safe? I don't understand." Her language was broken, but the translator on his wrist converted the words. He knelt slightly, so his eyes met hers, and he said, "You are not a toy. You are not an object. You are a person, and no one will ever hurt you again while you are with me." The alien girl stared at him, her mind torn between fear and disbelief. For so long she had known only chains and orders, never kindness, never freedom. Her heart raced, part of her wanting to believe, part of her terrified it was a trick. The human extended his hand once more, not forcing her, just waiting, and for the first time in her life, someone gave her a choice. She looked at his hand, trembling. Slowly, carefully, she placed her fragile fingers against his. It was not much, but it was the beginning of something she could not yet name. Hope. The freighter ship rumbled as the engines warmed, filling the quiet docking bay with a low hum. The alien girl stood at the edge of the ramp, hesitant, her bare feet touching the cold metal floor. She glanced back at the alleys that led to the slave market, fear still clinging to her like chains she could not see. Then she looked forward at the human who had bought her, yet had not treated her like an object. He waited patiently, his hand resting casually on the rail, his eyes calm, not demanding, not cruel. The silence between them was strange, heavy, but not threatening. She stepped onto the ramp slowly, her legs shaking as if she expected to collapse at any moment. Inside the ship, the air smelled of old steel, fuel, and faint traces of cooked food. The lights flickered, showing a place worn but alive, a home, not a prison. The human moved ahead and opened a small storage unit, pulling out a folded blanket and a box of food packs. He placed them on the table in front of her and said simply, "Eat, rest." The words were plain, but they confused her. No command to kneel, no threat, no harsh tone, only care. She sat down cautiously, her glowing eyes darting between the human and the food. The packet hissed open, and the smell of warm stew filled the air. Her stomach twisted with hunger, but she hesitated. Was this a trick? Was there poison? Would he punish her for taking too much? The human noticed her fear, and without a word, he took another pack, opened it, and ate in front of her. Slow, steady bites, as if to show it was safe. Only then did she reach forward, trembling, and taste the food. The warmth spread through her body, and for the first time in years, she ate without fear of being struck for it. The human watched her quietly, his eyes studying her, but not in the way others did. He was not measuring her like an item, not judging her value. Instead, it seemed as though he was trying to understand. After she finished, he slid the blanket toward her. "You will need this, sleep here," he said, pointing to a small bunk. Her lips parted in disbelief. "Sleep?" she whispered, the translator carrying her broken words. He nodded. "Yes, safe." She curled into the blanket, her thin frame almost disappearing inside its folds. Her glowing eyes stayed open for a long time, watching the man as he sat near the control panel, checking the ship's systems. Every sound of the engines made her flinch, every flicker of the lights made her tense. But slowly, her breathing steadied, the warmth of the blanket and the steady hum of the ship lulling her into uneasy sleep. The human, his name was Jareth, watched her in silence. He had seen too many like her, broken souls sold as property in the darker markets of the galaxy. But something in her eyes had stopped him. Even when she looked hopeless, there was still a spark buried deep inside. He had not bought her out of pity, nor out of foolishness. He had done it because he believed no one deserved to be treated like that, and because, perhaps, he felt her story was not finished yet. Hours later, the ship drifted through the cold void of space, stars stretching into lines as they entered jump. The girl woke suddenly, gasping, her chest heaving from a nightmare. She looked around wildly until her eyes found Jareth sitting nearby, his voice calm. "You are safe." She shook her head, her voice trembling. "Why? Why you by me? Not use, not break." Her words were broken, but heavy with fear. Jareth leaned back in his chair, his expression firm but kind. "Because you are not a toy, because you are more than what they called you, because no one deserves chains." Her eyes widened, her lips parting, but no words came. No one had ever said such things to her before. In her world, kindness was a lie, promises were traps, and mercy was weakness. Yet this human spoke as if it was the most natural truth in the universe. For days that followed, she remained cautious. She ate when given food, slept when told she was safe, but she never strayed far from her corner. Jareth never pushed her, never raised his voice, never demanded anything. He worked on the ship, made repairs, charted routes, and occasionally glanced her way to make sure she was all right. The silence between them slowly shifted, no longer heavy with fear, but filled with unspoken questions. One night, as the ship floated past a nebula glowing in blue light, she whispered, "Name?" He turned, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Jareth. My name is Jareth." She hesitated, then touched her chest, whispering a sound, soft and broken, Alira. Her name, the first thing she had shared with him. Jareth repeated it softly, letting it settle into the quiet of the ship. Alira. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, the corner of her lips lifted. Not quite a smile, but the shadow of one. It was the beginning of trust, fragile and trembling, but real. And as the ship drifted deeper into the stars, both of them knew this was only the start of a journey neither had expected. The days passed slowly aboard Jareth's freighter. For Alira, every hour felt strange, as if she were learning to breathe in a new world. The ship was old, its walls scratched from years of travel, yet it felt more alive than the silent cages of the slave market. There were no merchants shouting, no chains rattling, only the steady hum of engines and the soft rhythm of Jareth's footsteps as he moved from panel to panel. Alira began to watch him more closely. He fixed broken circuits, checked the fuel lines, cooked simple meals, and sometimes sat by the viewport staring into the stars. He did not treat her like property, nor did he demand anything from her. This confused her most of all. She had been raised, or rather broken, into believing every act of kindness was only a mask before pain. So she waited, expecting the moment when the mask would fall. One night, she woke from another nightmare, her breath ragged, her glowing blue eyes wide with fear. In her dreams, she was back in a market, the rods striking the cages, voices mocking her, hands pulling at her like she was less than alive. When she gasped awake, she found Jareth already standing near her, his voice calm and firm. "It's all right, Alira. You're safe." She stared at him, trembling. "Safe? Never safe," she whispered, the translator struggling with her broken words. Jareth knelt beside her bunk, not touching, just close enough that his steady presence grounded her. "No one here will hurt you," he said, his voice steady like iron. "Not while I live." Something inside her cracked at those words. No one had ever promised her safety before, and though she wanted to doubt, her heart betrayed her, beating faster as if clinging to the warmth of his voice. In the days that followed, small changes began to bloom. Alira started moving more freely through the ship, exploring its narrow halls and dusty rooms. She lingered near the kitchen when Jareth cooked, asking quiet questions in her broken language. She touched the control panels with childlike wonder, whispering strange words in her own tongue. And once, when she thought he was not looking, she smiled faintly at the sight of stars passing by the viewport. But their fragile peace was not unnoticed. On the fourth jump, the ship docked at a fueling station orbiting a barren moon. The place was crowded with traders, mercenaries, and scavengers, the kind of people who thrived on cruelty. When Alira followed Jareth out of the ship, wrapped in a cloak he had given her, whispers began immediately. Men laughed, pointing, calling her a toy, mocking Jareth for wasting credits on something useless. One burly trader sneered, "Didn't know humans bought pets to play wife. What's next, human? Gonna raise her like one of your kind." The laughter was cruel, sharp like blades. Alira froze, shame and terror flooding her veins. This was what she knew, the world's laughter, the stares, the mockery. But before she could retreat, Jareth stepped forward, his voice carrying across the docking bay. "She is not a toy," he said firmly, his eyes like steel. "She has a name, she has worth, and anyone who says otherwise can say it to me." The laughter faltered. The burly trader narrowed his eyes, sizing Jareth up, but the human did not back down. For a long moment, tension hung heavy in the air. Then the trader spat on the ground and turned away, muttering, "Humans and their strange morals." The crowd dispersed, but Alira's heart was pounding. She looked at Jareth, stunned. He had defended her, not as property, not as an owner, but as if she truly mattered. That night aboard the freighter, silence hung between them. Alira sat by the viewport, the nebula light reflecting in her glowing eyes. Finally, she whispered, "Why you fight for me?" Jareth sat across from her, his voice calm, Because you deserve someone to fight for you, because you are more than what they told you, and because I see you. The words struck her harder than any chain ever had. Her chest tightened, her throat burned, and for the first time, tears gathered in her eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light. She turned away, hiding her face, afraid of what he might think. But Jareth said nothing, only sat nearby, silent and steady, letting her cry without shame. That night, something shifted inside her. The chains she carried in her heart loosened, if only slightly. She still feared, still doubted, but now there was also something else, something dangerous yet beautiful. Hope. The freighter drifted through the void, its engines humming like a heartbeat against the silence of space. Inside, Illyra sat near the viewport again, her glowing eyes fixed on the endless stars. Every jump took them farther from the slave markets, but the shadows of her past still clung tightly. Memories whispered in her sleep, chains rattling in her mind, but now there was always a voice waiting when she woke. A steady voice that told her, "You are safe." Jareth gave her space, but not distance. He did not press her with questions, nor demand her trust. Instead, he showed her with quiet actions, placing food where she could reach it, fixing a torn seam in the cloak she wore, adjusting the ship systems so her small bunk stayed warm. Each act was simple, yet to her, they felt like pieces of a life she had never known. Slowly, Illyra began to speak more. Her words were broken, scattered, but Jareth listened with patience, never mocking. He repeated her name often, as if reminding her it had meaning. One evening, when he pointed to a control panel and explained its function, she tilted her head and repeated the words back to him, her soft voice unsure but eager. He smiled faintly. "You learn quickly," he said. Her chest warmed at those words, the glow in her eyes flickering brighter. Still, the world beyond their ship did not forget her. When they docked again at another trading outpost, whispers followed them as before. This time, Illyra pulled her hood lower, hiding her face. But Jareth placed a hand near her, not touching, just close enough that she could feel his presence, reminding her she was not alone. They gathered supplies, ignoring the stairs, but in one corner of the market, Illyra froze. A cage, small and rusted, sat in the shadows, and inside was another being, thin, terrified, eyes wide with the same despair she once carried. Illyra's breath caught, her heart racing. It was like staring at her reflection from weeks ago. Jareth noticed her trembling, his eyes following her gaze. He understood instantly, without a word. He placed his hand gently on her arm and guided her away. But she resisted, whispering, "Them same as me, trapped." Her voice cracked. Jareth's jaw tightened, his eyes darkening, but he said, "We cannot save everyone, Illyra." Her chest ached at those words, yet she knew he was right. Still, the memory of the caged soul burned into her heart. Back on the freighter, she sat in silence, curled beneath her blanket. Jareth repaired a circuit quietly nearby, his hand steady. Finally, she whispered, "Why you save me, not others?" His tools stilled, his voice low. "Because when I saw you, I knew I could not walk away, because sometimes saving one life is the beginning of saving many." His words sank deep into her, and though she did not fully understand, she felt their weight. That night, she dreamed not of chains, but of stars opening into endless paths. And when she woke, she found herself whispering, "Thank you, Jareth." He looked up from the pilot's seat, surprise flickering in his eyes before he gave a small nod. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You just need to live." Days later, their bond deepened in ways neither had expected. Illyra began to laugh softly when Jareth's old ship systems glitched and sparked. She touched his sleeve lightly when he showed her constellations through the viewport. She began to share small fragments of her past, not details but glimpses. A song her people once sang, a memory of silver rivers under twin moons. Her voice shook, but she gave those pieces to him, and he held them gently, never asking for more than she offered. But peace could not last forever. On their next stop, a group of mercenaries recognized Aelira, whispering to each other about the toy that had been sold and vanished. One approached Jareth with a sneer. "Careful, human, that one belongs to the market. If they find out you stole her, you'll have more enemies than you can count." Jareth's gaze hardened, his voice steady. "I didn't steal her, I freed her, and if anyone wants to claim otherwise, they'll have to go through me." The mercenary chuckled, but the edge in Jareth's voice made him back off. Still, the warning was clear. The galaxy would not let go of its chains easily. And Aelira knew, then, that Jareth's fight was not just against laughter or whispers, but against a world that had built itself on cruelty. Back aboard the freighter, she looked at him with wide eyes. "You risk life for me," she whispered. He met her gaze, unwavering. "You are worth it, Aelira." Her chest tightened, her heart pounding in a way she had never felt before. For the first time, she wondered if she was more than just free. Perhaps she was cherished. The freighter glided through a sea of stars, its hull carrying the scars of old battles and long journeys. Inside, Aelira stood near the control panels, her slender fingers brushing against the glowing buttons as if memorizing their shapes. Her glowing eyes reflected the starlight, curious yet cautious. Jareth stood nearby, explaining the simplest of systems. This one controls power flow, this one regulates oxygen. Aelira repeated the words in her soft, broken voice, sometimes stumbling, sometimes whispering in her own tongue before trying again. Jareth nodded each time, patient, his steady voice never sharp, never mocking. For her, even these small lessons were gifts, reminders she was no longer treated as a thing, but as someone who could learn. But shadows grew around them. At the fueling station days before, mercenaries had seen her, and whispers had already begun to spread. Slavers did not forget stolen property, and to them, Aelira was not free. She was profit lost. Jareth knew this, his jaw tightening each time the ship's sensors picked up stray signals in nearby sectors. Yet he did not tell her, not yet. He wanted her to feel peace for as long as she could. One evening, as the freighter drifted past the wreckage of an old battle station, Aelira sat near the viewport, the blanket wrapped around her. She turned to Jareth and asked softly, "Why always protect me?" Her voice carried more strength than before, less broken, but still fragile. Jareth leaned against the wall, his eyes steady on hers. "Because no one else did, because you deserve more than what they gave you, because you matter." The words struck deep, her breath catching, her heart pounding in confusion. Matter. She had never been told she mattered, not once in her life. That night, she dreamed of her old cage again, but this time the bars bent and broke, and instead of chains, she saw a hand reaching for her, a human hand. She woke with tears glowing faintly in her eyes, but for the first time, they were not only from fear, but from longing. The next day, their fragile world was shaken. As Jareth prepared to land at a small outpost for supplies, a transmission cut through the comms. "Unregistered human freighter. You are carrying stolen property. Hand her over, or face consequences." Aelira froze, her hands clutching the edge of her cloak, her body trembling. The voice was harsh, metallic, belonging to one of the Slaver Guild ships. Jareth's expression hardened, his voice calm but sharp as he replied, "She is no one's property, and you'll get nothing from me." The slaver ship blocked their path, its hull gleaming with weapons. Aelira's chest tightened, fear crashing into her like a storm. Her mind screamed that this was the end, that she would be dragged back, beaten, locked away once more. But Jareth's hands moved steadily across the controls, his voice low. "Stay with me. Aelira, don't be afraid." She whispered, "They come, take me back." He shook his head firmly. "Not while I live." The freighter jolted as the slavers fired warning shots, sparks flying across the panels. Jareth maneuvered sharply, the old ship groaning but holding steady. "Hold on," he said, guiding the freighter into an asteroid field. Rocks spun in all directions, massive shadows blotting out the stars. The slaver ship followed, its weapons firing, but Jareth's hands were quick, weaving through the field with skill born of years in space. Aelira gripped the chair beside her, her glowing eyes wide with terror and awe. Through the chaos, she whispered, "Why risk life for me?" Jareth did not look at her, his focus sharp, but his words carried steel. "Because you are not a toy, you are someone worth dying for." The battle raged for what felt like forever, but finally, the freighter dove between two massive asteroids, using their collision as cover. The explosion of rock and debris masked their escape, and the slaver ship was forced to break off. Silence returned to the freighter, broken only by the heavy hum of damaged engines. Aelira sat trembling, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She turned to Jareth, her voice breaking. "You fight whole galaxy for me." Jareth finally looked at her, sweat glistening on his brow, his voice calm. "If I have to." She stared at him, and for the first time, her fear gave way to something else, something she had not allowed herself to feel. Trust. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Jareth, I want to live with you." The words spilled out before she could stop them, raw and fragile. Jareth's eyes softened, his voice low but steady. "Then live, Aelira, live free, and live with me." Her glowing eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and though the galaxy would not stop hunting them, she knew one thing clearly. For the first time in her life, she was not alone, and for the first time, she truly believed she was free. The freighter floated in the quiet shadow of a gas giant, its engines cooling after the desperate escape. Inside, the hum of the ship was broken by the sound of sparks and the hiss of damaged systems. Jareth worked on the panels, his hands steady, though his body showed the wear of battle. Aelira stood nearby, her glowing eyes following him with worry. She had seen him fight an entire slaver ship for her, risk his life without hesitation, and it changed something deep inside her. For days, she had feared she was still just a burden, something fragile and weak. But as she watched Jareth patch the ship together, she realized he never once treated her that way. He did not see her as weight to carry, but as someone worth protecting, worth keeping close. Her heart trembled with feelings she did not yet understand. When the repairs were done, Jareth sank into the pilot's chair, exhaustion in his eyes. Aelira hesitated, then walked forward, her small hand trembling as she placed it gently on his shoulder. He looked up, surprised, and she whispered softly, "Thank you for not giving me back." His gaze softened, and he shook his head. "I told you, Aelira, you are not something to give away, you are someone to keep." Her breath caught at those words, her glowing eyes widening. That night, she could not sleep. She sat by the viewport, staring at the stars, her thoughts tangled. In her past, every touch had been a threat, every word a chain. But now, with Jareth, every word felt like freedom, every glance like warmth. The fear that once ruled her heart was slowly being replaced by something dangerous, something beautiful. Hope had turned into trust, and trust was slowly becoming love. But love was terrifying. Aelira did not know if she deserved it, did not know if he could ever truly see her as more than a broken soul. The thought made her chest ache. When Jareth sat down beside her, she whispered, "Why me? Why save me? Not someone better?" He turned to her, his voice calm but unshakable. "Because when I saw you, I knew you were more than what they said, because I saw strength in you, even when you didn't." Her eyes shimmered, tears threatening to fall. Strength? She had never thought of herself that way. But in his gaze, she saw no pity, only truth. For the first time, she dared to believe him. The following days brought small changes. Jareth showed her more of the ship, how to check the navigation, how to heat meals, how to run simple scans. Each time she succeeded, he nodded with quiet pride, and her heart warmed. She began to laugh softly at his muttered curses when the old ship system sparked. She began to hum faint songs from her world, the notes trembling but real. And once, when she saw him asleep in the chair, She placed the blanket over him, whispering his name softly, as if protecting him in return. But danger still lingered beyond the stars. They both knew the slavers would not stop hunting. And one evening, when the sensors beeped faintly, Jareth frowned at the readings. "They're searching closer now," he said. Fear gripped Alira's heart, but before panic could rise, Jareth turned to her, his voice steady. "Listen to me, Alira. Whatever happens, I will not let them take you. But you must choose. Do you want to keep running? Or do you want to fight for a life of your own?" Her breath shook, her glowing eyes wide. A choice. Once again, he gave her something no one else ever had. Slowly, with trembling hands, she touched her chest and whispered, "I want life with you." Jareth's chest tightened at her words, his eyes softening. He nodded firmly. "Then we'll build that life together." That night, as the freighter drifted silently, Alira sat close to him, closer than ever before. She leaned against his arm, hesitant, afraid he might pull away, but he did not. Instead, he let her rest there, his presence steady and warm. Her eyes closed, her heart finally calm. For the first time in her existence, she felt not like a prisoner, not like a possession, but like someone who belonged. And though the galaxy still hunted them, in that quiet moment she knew the truth. Chains could be broken, cages forgotten, wounds healed, because one human had chosen to fight not with cruelty, but with love. The freighter floated in silence above a quiet green world, its atmosphere glowing faintly with the shimmer of dawn. Jareth stood at the controls, watching the scanners, his eyes tired but steady. Alira sat beside him, wrapped in her cloak, her glowing eyes tracing the patterns of the land below. Forests, rivers, and valleys stretched endlessly, untouched by chains, untouched by markets. It was the kind of place that whispered of peace, of a future neither of them had dared to dream. Days had turned into weeks since they fled the slavers. The galaxy still hunted them, but here, in the shadow of this forgotten world, they had found a moment to breathe. Jareth landed the ship in a quiet clearing, the grass bending under the weight of metal. When the ramp lowered, Alira hesitated at the edge, her bare feet hovering above the earth. The wind brushed against her skin, carrying the scent of freedom. Slowly, she stepped down, her toes sinking into the soft ground. Her eyes widened, glowing brighter, and she whispered, "It feels alive." Jareth watched her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "It is, so are you." Her chest tightened at those words, her heart trembling. Every step she took into the open air felt like breaking another invisible chain. No cages, no laughter, no rods striking steel, only the sound of leaves swaying and birds calling in the distance. That night, they built a small fire by the ship. The flames crackled, casting shadows across their faces. Alira sat close, her hands warming against the heat, her eyes reflecting the stars above. She turned to Jareth, her voice soft but strong. "Why, always choose me, Jareth. You can have anyone, but you keep me." Jareth leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Because when I look at you, I don't see a toy, I don't see a slave, I see someone brave, someone who deserves more. And because I care for you." Her breath caught, her glowing eyes shimmering with tears. The firelight danced across her silver-streaked skin as she whispered, "Care for me?" He nodded, his voice low but firm. "Yes, Alira, I care more than I thought I ever could." Silence fell between them, but it was not heavy, it was full alive. Alira's trembling hand reached out slowly, and Jareth took it gently, not as an owner, not as a savior, but as an equal. Her heart raced, fear and hope colliding, but she did not let go. For the first time, touch did not mean chains, it meant choice. In the days that followed, they began to build more than survival. Jareth taught her how to read maps, how to repair circuits, how to stand with pride instead of fear. She taught him words from her language, soft songs of rivers and moons, pieces of a culture the galaxy had tried to erase. Together, They shaped something fragile but real, a life. But the galaxy's eyes were never far. One evening, as the stars burned above them, a transmission flickered on their comms, voices of slavers calling her property, demanding her return. Jareth's jaw tightened, but before he could answer, Illyria stepped forward, her voice steady. "I am not property. I am not toy. I am Illyria, and I choose my life." Her voice carried strength she had never believed she owned. Jareth looked at her with pride, his chest tightening at the sight of her standing tall. When the transmission ended, Jareth turned to her, his voice soft. "You are free, Illyria, but freedom is more than escape. It is choice, so I ask you, what do you want?" Her glowing eyes met his, shimmering with both fear and courage. Slowly, she stepped closer, her hand pressing to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I want you," she whispered, her voice breaking but true. "Not as master, not as savior, but as husband." Jareth's breath caught, his eyes widening, but then a faint smile broke across his face. He placed his hand gently over hers and whispered, "Then be my wife, Illyria." Her tears fell freely, glowing in the firelight, but this time they were not from despair. She nodded, her lips trembling into the first true smile she had ever known. And under the stars of a quiet world, a broken alien girl and a stubborn human made a vow that defied the galaxy. A vow of love, of freedom, of humanity's greatest strength. Not power, not weapons, but compassion. The galaxy had tried to chain her, to silence her, to make her nothing. But one human chose differently. And because of that choice, she was no longer a toy, no longer a prisoner. She was Illyria, loved, cherished, alive.